Hello, fellow neuro nerds. This is my submission for the Circle of Willis homework assignment. It's also the cranial vasculature assignment. But I'm just going to introduce you to my model here. It's made out of fiber optics, and red being the appropriate choice. I'm going to guide you through this. Starting down here at the bottom, coming up here, this is the interior carotid artery, and it goes up and it feeds the Circle of Willis, which parts of that are the middle cerebral artery here on both sides, the anterior cerebral arteries, and the posterior, which this one is kind of dim because of the bending of the fiber optics, but it's right there on the top. That's the posterior cerebral artery. And then coming up here at the back, we have the vertebral arteries. They come up and they come together and form the basilar artery here. And then up towards the top, the basilar artery terminates and you get the superior cerebellar artery, which is that bright one there. And you get the posterior cerebral artery. Also from this angle, you can see the anterior spinal artery coming off of that vertebral artery, and the posterior, kind of harder to see here, is a bright one right here on the side. That is the posterior spinal artery. And you also have the posterior inferior cerebellar arteries, or pica. And then above that, these super bright ones, you have the anterior inferior cerebellar arteries, or ICA. And then just above that, we have the superior cerebellar arteries that I had already pointed out. We're going to change viewpoints from this and look at a different angle. All right, this is a top-down look. Normally, like in the textbooks, when we see the Circle of Willis, we're looking from the bottom, the inferior view. But this is the superior view. So we see the Circle of Willis here. I'm not sure which, my hand gets in the way. So, Circle of Willis here. You have the anterior cerebral arteries. You have the middle cerebral arteries here and here. And the posterior cerebral arteries coming off the back here. And then you have the posterior communicating arteries on both sides here. And the anterior communicating artery here, which apparently there's only about 34% of people who have a complete circle, but that is the Circle of Willis. And we are going to change viewpoints again to look at some of the vasculature from a different angle. All right, this is an anterior view of the vasculature, and I'm going to walk you through the different vessels here. So first we have the, coming up the side, this one's pretty dark. Ooh, I'm getting some flash there, apologize, but these are vertebral arteries coming up the side there. That's hard to say. Let's see, I apologize. All right, but then as we look here, we've got this V shape in the middle. That is the anterior spinal artery coming off of those vertebral arteries, and that'll go down the anterior side of the spinal cord. And then right behind it, you can kind of see the posterior spinal artery, which will, of necessity, go down the posterior side of the spinal cord. And as you come up just above that, you see these little appendages coming off here on either side. Those are the posterior inferior cerebellar arteries, or pica. And as we move up, we come to the basilar artery. It's that one right in the middle, and it's kind of hard to tell on here, but it's this big, long clump of stuff, which really should be one artery, but fiber optics don't play nice when you try and push them all together. So that's the basilar artery. And then coming off about, well, it differs on different people, but these are the anterior inferior cerebellar arteries, or ICA. So you've got pica down here below, and then you've got ICA here on either side. And then at the terminus of the basilar artery, up here at the top, you have the superior cerebellar arteries. That's these bright ones. And just above those, you also have the posterior cerebral artery, which doesn't show up very well in this one, but it's there. All right, finally, this is the model in its skeletal state without being lit up. I left a couple of them lit up so you can kind of see they've got the little laser pointers taped to it, and then wrap the Velcro around, and it initiates the laser pointer. I've got 8 of them. There's 2 back here in the back that did the vertebral and interior carotid arteries, and came up and did the, they also lit the circle of Willis. And then these 2 are doing the anterior and posterior spinal arteries, and these 2 here are actually lighting up the pica, the ICA, and the superior cerebellar arteries. So it hit all 3 of them. That's why it was kind of dim on some of them. And then these 2 up front, I still have them on, but they come up, they do the anterior, there we go, they do the anterior cerebral arteries, the middle cerebral arteries, and the posterior cerebral arteries, which those were really dim. It's really hard to see the posterior. And then they also kind of helped to light up the circle of Willis, the anterior communicating, the posterior communicating. So doesn't look as cool when it's not lit up.